Hello and good morning. Welcome to Bill Riccardi's weekly Patreon update. I, of course, am Bill Riccardi, a creator and purveyor of fantasy novels. What do we have in the queue this week? We're going to be looking at the end of Cadence Beta and what that means to you. This includes things like preview periods for people who are on the mailing list and for patrons. We are going to be talking a little bit about the romance deal that might be in the works and what that means as far as schedules and things of that nature. And then finally, we're going to talk about external participation and what that means, not only for beta readers but for other contributors to the book. What that means as far as book releases and how that impacts things. So let's start at the start. The Cadence Beta is now coming to a close. People who have beta access are going to find that gone fairly shortly, and then we do the final copywriting. And after the final copyright, there's going to be no access to the book for anyone until 2 to 3 days before, where patrons will get their early look, and then mailing list participants, also known as superfans, will get their early look as well. Those factors are pretty much set in stone now. We can talk a little bit about why it was so slow. We'll talk about that in the third section. But the good news is cover art should be finalized today. I just got some of the final proofs in, and that should be a done deal. After I get those, the final lettering will happen, and after the final lettering, I will send out to the mailing list as well as to my patrons, of course, an early preview of what the cover is going to look like. So that's that. The second bit, romance. Well, that's a different topic for me, right? You probably heard, if you were updated last week, that my romance novel got picked up for close examination by two different fairly robust independent romance publishers. These are some of the big players in the game right now. It's flattering and it's great, and it may change my business model somewhat. Here's how it impacts things. If that romance novel gets picked up and they say, my goodness, we want more of these, we need more of these, I'm going to have to dedicate some time to writing romance novels. It's a simple commercial factor. When your fantasy stuff is selling okay, but romance is the hot thing right now, there's a few different ways to go, and that's put more romance in your books. But that's kind of a cop-out. Or you can just write some really lucrative romance on the side that will fund all the rest of your passion projects, right? And that's very likely the way that I'll be going. Not to mention that I love writing what I've written already, and if that's the brand of romance they want, which is magical realism stuff, if that's going to become popular, if that's going to be the next thing, the Studio Ghibli type of romances, I love writing those, and I'm very good at writing those. So we'll see what happens. That's the long and short of that. But do expect more announcements about the romance line if this gets picked up in short order. I did get my first rejection for the romance, but that pales in comparison to the two quick and very positive requests for a full document, for a full manuscript. I'll take 2 out of 3 any day of the week in this case. So, I'm fairly happy with the way that's going. More news on that as it comes. Finally, how do external influences factor into a release cycle? Well, as you know, beta participation was quite low. The percentage of people who participated in the beta was quite low, and I expected my superfans from the mailing list to kind of pick up the slack on that, but they did not. Sadly, there was no participation from the superfans, which meant that I had to spend basically the last week going through word by word the Cadence document again and again and again, just to make sure that it's in the best order possible before publication. This is in order to save a couple thousand to 3,000 for a professional full-time editor to go through it. I'm not one of the big boys, and I can't afford to do that. That cuts in quite a bit to my profits. I'm not one of the big advertisers who spends, 20,000 a year on advertising only to get back 25,000 in sales. I can't do that. I can spend hundreds in capital for things like book covers and editing and stuff like that per book, and then I need thousands back in order to make the kind of money, and that's been working so far. But I cannot afford to splash out for a lot of professional stuff, so I do a lot of it myself. And the good news is I've done it for others in the past, particularly during my ghostwriting career. But applying it to yourself requires a lot more distance, right? So it takes a lot more time. So that's how external factors have impacted this book release. We're about a month late, and that's going to probably have a kick-on effect to all the rest of my books, which means instead of a September release, we might be looking at an October release for the next fantasy novel. And then depending on whether or not romance gets thrown into the picture, the holiday release might be a very different story. I might have a romance holiday release, and then we get back to the normal schedule of 3 books a year on the 4th, the 8th, and the 12th month next year. So we'll see what happens there. I just want to warn people that the release schedule might be slightly different this year simply because of the delays that we saw. Of course, anyone who wants to become a beta reader, please let me know. It's an important role, particularly to my process. I take a lot of that feedback directly on board. So that is what has happened this week. Next week is the actual Cadence launch. Knock on wood. You should get one more update just before launch, but you should have your previews before then. So hang out with me. This weekend's going to be a busy weekend for me, and feel free to drop me a line and let me know what you think. Thanks again, everyone. It's a cloudy day here in Belfast, but we're making the most of it, and I hope everyone has a wonderful and safe weekend. Cheers.